The air on the Galactic Union's observation deck was always a little too thin and smelled a little too clean, like a hospital. It never felt like a place where people lived. It was a place for watching. Today, Jean and Sue were watching the end of human pride. On the giant holographic screen that filled one whole wall of the room, a massive creature was roaring. His name was Kaler. He was the champion of the Zare, a species so warlike and so strong that they had challenged every new race to join the Union for the last 500 years. His skin was like thick green scales and he had 4 powerful arms. He stood over the broken body of a human man in powered combat armor. The armor was cracked open like an eggshell. Kaler kicked the limp body aside. It slid across the floor of the arena with a terrible scraping sound. Is this the best of humanity? Kaler's voice was translated by the universal comm system. It came out as a deep, mocking boom that filled the quiet observation deck. You are soft. You break easily. You have no fire in your hearts. Jean, a young man with a steady but now troubled face, felt his hands curl into tight fists. He had watched the same scene 3 times now. 3 different human champions, each one stronger and more highly trained than the last, had gone into that arena. None had lasted more than a minute. This last one, a major from the Martian Marines, was supposed to be the best. He had lasted 20 seconds. His fighting style is simple, Sue said from beside him. Her voice was quiet but sharp. She was seeing what others missed. It is all power. He relies on his strength and his speed to overwhelm his opponents. He does not expect a real fight. Jean shook his head. It does not matter what his style is, Sue. Look at him. No one can get close. No one can hurt him. And he plays with them. He pointed at the screen where Kaler was now laughing, a nasty, grating sound. The Zare champion raised his 4 arms to the invisible cameras, addressing the whole galaxy. This is boring. I was told humans were fierce predators from a death world. I see only frightened prey. Send another. Send your very best warrior. I wish to see if any of you can make me take a single step back. In the center of the observation deck, the head of the human delegation, Ambassador Lee, had a face the color of ash. He was an old man and he looked like he had just aged another 10 years. He was talking quietly and quickly with his aides. Their shoulders were slumped. They looked defeated. What can we do? One of the aides whispered, his voice desperate. We have no one left. The Martian major was our final military option. Ambassador Lee closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, he looked toward a quiet corner of the deck where a small, separate team was monitoring the data feeds. There is one more name on the list, he said, his voice heavy. The specialist we requested from the Xenostudies Institute on Europa. A few people turned to look, confusion on their faces. A specialist? In what? Alien pottery? A general muttered, his voice thick with scorn and disappointment. In Zarian biology, Ambassador Lee replied softly. This caused a wave of murmurs. Jean and Sue exchanged a look of pure disbelief. A biologist? Jean said, his voice low so only Sue could hear. They are sending a scientist to fight that monster? He will tear her apart before she can say a word. Sue did not answer right away. Her sharp eyes were fixed on the main door to the observation deck. The ambassador said her. He is not sending a soldier, Jean. He is sending a woman. Why? Before Jean could answer, the doors to the observation deck hissed open. Everyone turned to look. The woman who entered was not what anyone expected. She was tall and had a calm way of moving that made the busy, nervous people around her seem unsteady. She was not young, but she was not old either. She had lines around her eyes that suggested she spent more time looking at data screens than sleeping. Her hair was a simple brown, pulled back. She wore the dark blue, practical uniform of a science and diplomacy envoy. There were no medals, no rank insignia, just a small patch on her shoulder with the earth and olive branches. This was Dr. Elena Petrova. She did not look at the horrific scene on the view screen. She did not look at the defeated faces of the military staff. She walked directly to Ambassador Lee, her posture perfectly straight. Ambassador, she said. Her voice was calm and clear, without a trace of fear. It was the voice of someone used to explaining complex things. Dr. Petrova, the ambassador began, his own voice shaky. Thank you for coming so quickly. The situation is, you can see. He gestured weakly toward the screen where Kaler was now pounding his chests, demanding a new opponent. I have been monitoring the situation, Elena said. She finally glanced at the screen. Her expression did not change. She looked at Kaler not with fear or hatred, but with a kind of focused interest, like a doctor looking at an X-ray. Your file, your doctoral thesis? The ambassador stammered, trying to find the words. It was on the comparative neurology of predatory bipedal species, with a focus on the Zare. That is correct, Elena said. The Union rules state we must send a representative to answer the challenge. We have no more soldiers to send. The Zare? They only understand strength. If we refuse to send anyone, or if our champion is defeated without a fight, our application to the Galactic Union will be denied. We will be labeled a passive, non-threatening species. It would limit our trade, our travel, our everything. He took a deep breath. Dr. Petrova, your research. Is there anything? Anything at all that can help? Elena Petrova looked from the ambassador's desperate face back to the image of the roaring Kaler. For a moment, she was silent. The entire deck waited on her answer. I have studied the Zare for 15 years, she said finally. I know their physical structure. I know their weaknesses. A spark of hope appeared in the ambassador's eyes. Weaknesses? You can tell our next champion how to fight him. There will be no next champion, Elena said, her tone still calm and factual. You have run out of those. According to the challenge protocols, you can nominate any human as your representative. It does not have to be a soldier. The ambassador stared at her. The meaning of her words slowly dawned on him and everyone else listening. The silence in the room was absolute. You are proposing that we nominate you? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jean, from his spot across the room, felt his stomach drop. She is crazy, he breathed out. He will kill her. This is a suicide mission. But Sue was watching Elena's face. No, Jean, she whispered back. Look at her eyes. She is not crazy. She is certain. She is not going out there to die. She is going out there to do an experiment. Elena Petrova gave a single, small nod to the ambassador. I am the leading expert on Zarian physiology. I am the logical choice. I am aware of the risks. I am ready. She turned and, without another word, began to walk toward the preparation room that led to the arena transit tube. The crowd of diplomats and officers parted for her, their faces a mixture of horror, pity, and confusion as the doors closed behind her. The observation deck erupted into frantic noise. Everyone was talking at once. The generals were protesting. The aides were panicking. Jean just stared at the spot where the woman had been standing. He saw the giant, roaring monster on the view screen, a being of pure muscle and rage. Then he pictured the calm, intelligent face of Dr. Elena Petrova. He could not put the two images together. It was like sending a librarian to stop a charging bull. They are not sending a warrior, Jean said, his voice full of dread. They are sending a sacrifice. Sue shook her head slowly, her gaze still fixed on the empty doorway. A strange, small smile touched her lips. Or maybe, she said, they are finally sending the right tool for the job. The silence in the observation deck did not last. It was broken by the sound of Ambassador Lee letting out a long, shaky breath. He looked like a man who had just ordered someone to walk off a cliff. Around him, the room erupted into a storm of whispers and worried voices. This is a disaster. One of the military aides said, his voice tight. We are sending a scientist to a gladiator arena. The Zare will see it as the ultimate insult. They might even declare war over this. What other choice do we have? Another aide replied, throwing her hands up. We have no one else. Should we just forfeit? Admit that humanity is weak. Jean listened to them argue. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. He looked at the main screen. Kaler was pacing the arena floor like a caged animal, his tail whipping back and forth. He was growing impatient. The thought of that calm woman, Dr. Petrova, stepping into that circle with him made Jean feel sick. We have to stop this, Jean said, turning to Sue. We can't let her do it. Sue was not looking at the arguing diplomats. She was at a secondary console, her fingers flying over the screen. She had pulled up a file. It was Dr. Elena Petrova's official Galactic Union academic profile. Look at this, Jean, Sue said, her voice low and intense. Jean came to stand behind her. The screen was filled with text and complex diagrams of alien biology. He saw the skeletal structure of a Zare warrior, with muscle groups and nerve clusters highlighted in bright colors. What am I looking at? Jean asked. I see biology charts. This is her life's work, Sue explained. She pointed to a long list of publications. 15 years of study. Neurological reflexes in the Zare species. Evolutionary flaws in bipedal predators. The occipital nexus. A vestigial vulnerability. Jean shook his head, not understanding. So she knows a lot about them. That doesn't mean she can fight one. Maybe it does, Sue insisted. She zoomed in on one particular diagram. It showed the back of a Zare skull and the top of its thick neck. A specific point was marked with a flashing red dot. The label read, Motor Function Disruption Point, Occipital Nexus. What is that? Jean asked, peering at the complex medical terms. I am not completely sure, Sue admitted. But it is a weak spot. A place where a small amount of pressure can cause a big problem. She has written entire papers about just this one spot. Before Jean could ask more, a new voice, sharp and angry, cut through the noise of the room. It was General Quan, the head of the military advisors. He was a large man with a face like stone. He marched up to Ambassador Li. "Li, this is insanity," General Quan barked. "I will not allow you to send an unarmed civilian to her death. It is a stain on our honor. I will go myself." A few soldiers nearby nodded in agreement, their faces grim. Ambassador Li looked old and tired. "Your honor is noted, General. But your defeat would be just as certain as the Major's, and it would achieve nothing. Dr. Petrova. She believes she has a chance. A chance based on what? A theory from a book." General Quan scoffed. "This is not a university lecture. This is a fight for our species' reputation. What if knowledge is the weapon?" Sue's voice, though quiet, carried across the room. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood up from her console, her face pale but determined. General Quan glared at her. "What did you say?" "I said, what if knowledge is the weapon?" Sue repeated, her voice gaining strength. "We have been sending soldiers to fight a monster with muscle. We have been using the wrong tool. What if she is the right one? What if her mind is the weapon we should have been using all along?" The general stared at her as if she were speaking a different language. "Child, you have been watching too many fantasy stories. In the real world, power wins, not ideas." Just then, a soft chime echoed through the deck. A calm, automated voice announced, "Human representative, Dr. Elena Petrova, is prepared for transit to the arena." All arguments stopped. All eyes turned to a smaller view screen that showed the airlock entrance to the arena transit tube. The door slid open, and Elena Petrova stepped into view. She had not changed into combat gear. She still wore her simple science envoy uniform. It was clean and pressed. She had not even tied her hair back. It fell loosely around her shoulders. She carried nothing in her hands. "No weapon, no shield." She looked like she was on her way to give a presentation, not to fight for her life. Jean felt a pang of despair. She looked so normal, so completely out of place. On the main screen, Kaler had stopped pacing. He saw the new figure appear at the far end of the arena. A deep, rumbling laugh started in his chest. It was a cruel, mocking sound. "What is this?" His translated voice boomed. "A new toy for me to break? Did you run out of warriors and send a servant?" Elena did not react to his words. She began to walk across the wide arena floor. Her steps were even and calm. She did not hurry. She did not slow down. She walked with a quiet confidence that was unnerving to watch. Kaler watched her approach, his head tilted. He seemed more confused than angry. "Are you lost, Softskin? This is the arena of challenge. This is a place of death." Elena stopped about 10 meters from him. She was so much smaller than he was. He towered over her, a mountain of scale and muscle. She looked up at him, her face still showing that same focused interest. "I am the human representative," she said. Her voice was picked up by the arena microphones. It was clear and firm, without a single shake. For a moment, Kaler was silent. Then his laughter returned, louder and more vicious than before. It echoed around the vast arena. "You?" he roared. "They send a female? A scientist? I can smell the datapads on you. You have no fire. You have no battle rage." He took a thundering step forward, making the floor vibrate. "This is an insult, a joke. I will not waste my energy on such a fragile thing. Turn around. Walk away. Tell your leaders to send a real fighter, or admit that humanity is a race of cowards." Elena did not move. She did not flinch. She simply stood there, her hands relaxed at her sides. "I am the representative," she repeated, her tone unchanged. "The challenge has been accepted." Kaler's laughter died. His four fists clenched. His eyes, small and dark, narrowed. He was growing truly angry now. He was being ignored. He was being disobeyed. This soft, quiet thing was not showing him the fear he expected. "You wish to die?" he snarled, taking another step closer. "You wish to be a sacrifice? Very well. I will grant your wish, but it will be quick. I do not play with my food when it is this pathetic." In the observation deck, Jean could not watch. He turned his face away. "He is going to kill her with one blow," he whispered. "She is just standing there." Sue, however, did not look away. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Elena's calm posture. "No," Sue whispered back. "Look at her feet. She is not in a fighting stance. She is not preparing to dodge. It is like she is waiting for something. She is waiting for him to crush her." Jean said, his voice cracking with frustration. On the screen, Kaler let out a final, disgusted grunt. He decided to end the farce. He did not even bother to charge. He simply took 2 large, quick steps forward, his primary right fist swinging in a wide, brutal arc meant to smash her aside like a bug. It was a lazy, contemptuous blow. And Elena Petrova, the European woman who had studied him for 15 years, finally moved. The air in the arena was still and heavy. Kaler's lazy, powerful swing cut through it. His fist, larger than Elena's head, moved to swat her away. It was a motion of pure contempt, so simple he did not even put his full strength into it. He expected to see her fly across the room and break against the wall. Elena moved. It was not a dramatic leap. It was not a frantic scramble. It was a single, precise step to her left. Her body shifted just enough. The movement was so small, so economical, it looked almost casual. The wind from Kaler's passing fist stirred the loose strands of her hair. His knuckles missed her by less than a hand's width. The force of his own swing, hitting nothing but air, made Kaler grunt in surprise. His balance was slightly off for a single, crucial moment. His massive body was turned, exposing the back of his neck for a fraction of a second. In that tiny window of time, Elena's right hand shot forward. It was not a punch. There was no power behind it from her shoulders or hips. It was a thrust like a snake striking. She used only her arm, and she did not make a fist. Instead, she held her hand stiff, with her index and middle fingers extended and pressed tightly together. The other fingers were curled in. Her target was not a muscle or a bone. It was a single, specific point, a spot at the very base of his skull, right where the hard, bony plate met the softer, scaled skin of his thick neck. It was the exact point she had spent 15 years of her life studying, the occipital nexus. Her two fingers struck that spot with a sharp, precise jab. The impact made a small, almost silent sound. It was not a sound of violence. It was the sound a doctor might make when tapping a knee to test a reflex. It was a clinical sound, a scientific sound. To Kaler, it was the sound of the universe ending. A bolt of white-hot lightning shot down his spine. It was not pain, not exactly. It was something far worse. It was a sudden, total disconnect. The message from his brain to his body was severed. The roaring command in his mind to stand, to fight, to crush this insect, simply vanished into a void. His vision did not go black. It stayed perfectly clear. He could see the metallic sheen of the arena floor. He could see the small, calm feet of the human woman standing in front of him. But he could not move his head to look at her. A strange gurgle escaped his throat, replacing the mighty roar that was building there. His four arms, which had been held ready to grab her, went limp. They dropped to his sides like heavy sacks of meat. The feeling of immense power that had always filled his body was gone. It was replaced by a terrifying nothingness. He was a prisoner inside his own flesh. His legs, which had supported his great weight through 100 battles, turned to water. They buckled at the knees. There was no slow collapse. It was a sudden, total failure. His body tipped forward and crashed face down onto the arena floor. The impact was a loud, final thud that echoed in the sudden, absolute silence. He did not lose consciousness. He lay there, his face pressed against the cold metal, his eyes wide open and staring in pure, undiluted horror. He could not move a finger. He could not twitch his tail. He could not even blink. He could only breathe in shallow, ragged gasps. The great champion of the Zair was not unconscious. He was paralyzed. The entire galactic audience was silent. Billions of beings, from 1,000 different species, watched their screens without a sound. They had expected a quick and brutal death. They had not expected this. This was not a fight. This was medicine.in the human observation deck. The silence was even deeper. For a long moment, no one breathed. They had all seen Kaler's fist swing. They had all seen Elena step aside. They had all seen her hand move too fast to follow. And they had all seen the invincible champion fall like a tree. Jin's mouth was hanging open. He was still braced for the sight of her broken body. His mind could not process what had just happened. What did she do? He stammered. Did she have a hidden weapon? An energy blade. Sue was trembling, but her eyes were shining with a fierce, bright understanding. No, she whispered, her voice full of awe. No weapon. It was the diagram. The red dot on the diagram. She knew. She always knew. On the arena floor, Elena Petrova looked down at the fallen giant. Her expression had not changed. There was no smile of triumph. No look of relief. There was only the calm, focused satisfaction of a researcher whose hypothesis has been proven correct. She did not look at the cameras. She did not raise her arms in victory. She simply stood over him, a scientist examining the results of her experiment. Then, she turned her head slightly, looking toward the section of the arena reserved for the Zair delegation. She knew they were there, watching, their own horror surely as complete as Kaler's. She spoke, and her voice was as calm and clear as it had been in the observation deck. It was amplified across the arena and transmitted to every corner of the watching galaxy. As detailed in my published work on Zarian neurology, she began, as if she were addressing a conference hall, your species possesses a cluster of nerve ganglia at the occipital nexus. It is a structural flaw, a vestige of your evolutionary past. She paused, letting the clinical, dispassionate words sink in. They were more devastating than any war cry. A precise strike of 3 newtons of pressure to that point, she continued, disrupts all voluntary motor function. It does not require great strength. It only requires knowledge. She finally shifted her gaze, looking directly into the nearest camera, the one that carried her image to the human delegates and to all of humanity. You asked for our best warrior, she said, her voice firm. You should have been more specific. Humanity's greatest weapon has never been our strength. It has never been our rage. It has always been our mind. Back in the observation deck, Gene finally understood. He looked from Sue's triumphant face to the image of the small, calm woman standing over the paralyzed monster. The cold knot in his stomach vanished, replaced by a soaring, incredible pride that he had been wrong. They had all been wrong. They had not sent a sacrifice. They had not sent a warrior. They had sent a teacher. And she had just given the galaxy its most important lesson. The silence that followed Elena Petrova's words was not like any silence Gene had ever known. It was thick and heavy, filled with the shock of a universe that had just been turned upside down. On the giant screen, the image was frozen in time. The small, calm woman and the massive, fallen warrior who could not even twitch. Then, a single sound broke the spell. It was the sound of one person clapping. Gene turned. It was Sue. She was standing at her console, her hands coming together in slow, deliberate claps. Her eyes were fixed on the screen. Shining with tears, she did not bother to wipe away. The sound was small in the large room, but it was sharp and clear that a moment later, Gene joined her. He clapped, not with wild celebration, but with a deep, respectful rhythm. He was clapping for the mind. He was clapping for the quiet power of knowledge. One by one, others in the observation deck joined in. The young communications officer, the old data analyst, the junior diplomat who had been so pale just minutes before. The applause grew, spreading through the room like a wave. It was not loud and cheering. It was a thunderous, rolling sound of awe and relief. People were crying. Others were laughing in disbelief. The military aides, who had been so scornful, were now clapping the hardest, their faces filled with a new kind of respect. Ambassador Lee stood in the middle of it all, his hands pressed together in front of his mouth. He was not clapping. He was just staring, his body shaking with silent sobs of relief. He had gambled everything on a theory, and the theory had been perfect. On the main view screen, the scene in the arena began to change. A team of Zarian medics, large and armored but moving with a new, frantic haste, rushed onto the floor. They carried advanced medical equipment. They surrounded their fallen champion, their movements sharp with panic. They did not look at Elena. They ignored her completely. As if she were a dangerous ghost, they were afraid to acknowledge. One of the medics pressed a device against Kaler's neck. There was a soft hum. After a few seconds, a low, pained groan came from the giant. A tremor went through one of his arms. The paralysis was not permanent. Elena had calculated the exact amount of pressure needed. It was a temporary disablement, a demonstration, not an execution. This small sign of recovery did not calm the medics. If anything, it made them more agitated. The fact that a single, gentle touch from an unarmed human could do this was more terrifying than any weapon. They carefully rolled Kaler onto a medical stretcher. He was still mostly paralyzed, his eyes still wide with terror. They lifted him and hurried him away, their retreat as swift and silent as their entrance. Elena watched them go. She showed no emotion. She had done what she came to do. The arena was now empty again. Save for her, a door hissed open on the human side of the arena. 2 human security officers, looking stunned and hesitant, stepped out to escort her back. She gave them a small, reassuring nod and began to walk towards them. Her steps as calm and even as when she had entered the observation deck. The applause was finally dying down, replaced by a buzz of excited conversation. The mood had transformed from despair to triumphant disbelief. She knew. A diplomat was saying, his voice giddy. She knew the whole time. One move. She only used one move. Another exclaimed. Gene turned to Sue, his mind racing with questions. Sue, how? How did she know it would work? What if she had missed that spot by a centimeter? Sue finally looked away from the screen, her expression serious. She did not miss Gene. That is the point. For 15 years, that spot was all she thought about. She probably knew its exact location better than she knew the features of her own face. To her, Kaler was not a monster. He was a diagram, a map, and she knew exactly where to press. Just then, the main communication console lit up with an urgent, priority signal. The symbol of the Zarian Empire glowed on the screen. The buzz in the room instantly stopped. Everyone froze, looking at the console. Was this a declaration of war? An angry threat? Ambassador Lee straightened his jacket, wiped his eyes, and took a deep breath. He walked to the console and accepted the call. The face of the Zarian ambassador appeared on the screen. He was an older Zare, his scales a darker green, his face lined with what now looked like deep worry. He was not roaring. He was not angry. He looked shaken. Ambassador Lee, the Zarian said, his translated voice much quieter and more formal than Kaler's booming tone. Ambassador Vorlek, Lee replied, his voice carefully neutral. There was a long pause. The Zarian seemed to be struggling to find the right words. He looked down, then back at the camera. The challenge is concluded, Vorlek said finally. The victory is awarded to humanity. A fresh wave of whispers went through the observation deck. They had won. Officially. Your representative, the Zarian continued, hesitating. Her method was unconventional. It was within the rules of the challenge, Ambassador Lee said smoothly. There were no restrictions on the type of attack. Of course, Vorlek said quickly. Too quickly. It was clear the thought of restricting such a thing had never occurred to them. Who would need to? We acknowledge this. We merely wish to inquire about the scientific basis of Dr. Petrova's technique. Jean and Sue exchanged a look. The mighty Zare were not demanding revenge. They were asking for a study reference. Ambassador Lee allowed a small, diplomatic smile to touch his lips. I am sure Dr. Petrova's published papers are available in the Galactic Union's academic database. I believe her most relevant work is titled The Occipital Nexus, a vestigial vulnerability in the Zarian species. You may find it enlightening. The Zarian ambassador's face, on the screen, seemed to grow even more troubled. The idea that their greatest weakness was not only known but had been published for anyone to read was a devastating blow. I see, Vorlek said softly. Thank you for the information. The communication ended. The screen went dark. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the observation deck erupted in cheers. This time, it was not the quiet, awed applause. It was loud and full of joy. People were hugging, slapping each other on the back. Jean looked out the large observation window at the stars. Humanity had just passed its test. They had not done it with bombs or lasers. They had done it with a single, precise touch from a scientist. He thought about all the other species out there, all the bullies and champions who thought strength was the only thing that mattered. They would be talking about this day. They would be looking at humanity differently. He turned to Sue, a wide grin finally spreading across his face. They didn't need a bigger gun, he said, echoing her earlier thought. Sue grinned back, her own relief now plain to see. No, she said. They just needed the right key. And we had the locksmith. The celebration in the observation deck was loud and full of energy. People who had been afraid and defeated just an hour before were now laughing and talking excitedly. The mood was like a party, but Jean noticed that Sue was not joining in. She had returned to her console, her face thoughtful as she scanned the data feeds. What is it? Jean asked, coming to stand beside her. We won. Isn't this a good thing? It is a very good thing, Sue said, without looking up. But the game has changed. Look, she pointed to her screen. It was a live feed from the Galactic Union News Network. The headline, translated into basic English, read, Humanity redefines strength. Knowledge trumps power. They are already talking about it, Sue said. Everyone is. She switched to another feed. This one showed a different alien species, one with feathers and sharp eyes, discussing the event. The translator picked up phrases like, unprecedented tactical paradigm, and a fundamental reassessment of human capabilities is required. Before today, Sue explained, the galaxy saw us as loud newcomers with good weapons. Now they see us as something else. Something more dangerous because they do not understand us. Jean frowned. Dangerous? We just proved we do not need to fight. We proved we can win without a fight, Sue corrected him. That is more frightening to some people than a big army. How do you defend against an idea? How do you armor yourself against a fact? As she spoke, the main door to the observation deck hissed open. The noise in the room dropped away instantly. Dr. Elena Petrova stood in the doorway. She looked exactly the same as when she had left. Her uniform was still clean and unwrinkled. Her hair was still loose. There was no sweat on her brow, no rapid breathing. She did not look like someone who had just defeated a galactic champion. She looked like she had just returned from a short, quiet walk. For a moment, everyone just stared at her. The heroes they were used to were soldiers who came back bruised and bloody, full of stories of the fight. She was none of those things. Ambassador Lee was the first to move. He walked towards her, his steps slow and full of respect. He stopped in front of her and, to everyone's surprise, gave a deep, formal bow. Dr. Petrova, he said, his voice thick with emotion. On behalf of all humanity, thank you. You have saved our future. Elena gave a small, polite nod. Thank you, Ambassador. I was simply applying my research. Your application has changed everything, the ambassador said. He gestured to the room. We are receiving messages from dozens of species. Trade agreements we thought were lost are being reopened. New allies are asking for meetings. The Zaire have gone completely silent, which is the best news of all. Just then, General Quan stepped forward. The stern military man looked uncomfortable. He stood stiffly in front of Elena, his eyes on the floor for a moment before he met her gaze. Dr. Petrova, he began, his voice rough. I was wrong. I spoke against your nomination. I believed only a warrior could face a warrior. I did not understand. He paused, gathering his words. You have shown us a new kind of warfare, a smarter kind. You have my deepest respect. Elena looked at him with the same calm, analytical expression she had used on Kaler. Thank you, General. But it is not a new kind of warfare. It is an old kind of human skill. We have always used our minds to solve problems that our bodies cannot. We just forgot for a little while. Her words were simple, but they hit Jean with the force of a physical blow. She was right. Humanity's greatest achievements had never been about being the strongest. They were about being the smartest, about understanding the world and using that understanding to survive and to grow. The crowd in the room began to press closer, everyone wanting to thank her, to ask her a question, to just be near her. She handled them with the same quiet patience, answering technical questions about Zarian biology with ease, but deflecting any attempts to call her a hero. Jean and Sue watched from the side. She does not even seem to realize what she has done, Jean whispered. Oh, she realizes, Sue said. She just sees it differently. To her, this was a successful experiment. The cheering and the politics are just background noise. The important part was proving her theory correct. After a while, Elena politely excused herself from the crowd. She walked over to the observation window, looking out at the stars. Jean and Sue saw their chance. They hesitantly approached her. Dr. Petrova? Sue said softly. Elena turned. Her eyes were intelligent and calm. Yes, my name is Sue. This is Jean. We were monitoring the data during the challenge. Elena gave a small nod. I see. Your work is important. Good data is the foundation of all understanding. We saw the diagram, Jean blurted out. The one with the red dot on the neck. Was that really all it was? Yes, Elena said. It is a precise biological mechanism, like turning off a switch. But weren't you scared? Jean asked. He was so big. What if you had missed? For the first time, a faint, real smile touched Elena's lips. It was a tired smile, but a genuine one. I have been studying that red dot for 15 years, she said. In my mind, I have practiced that movement 10,000 times. I was not facing a monster, Jean. I was correcting a flaw in a biological system. There was no room for fear, only for focus. Sue looked at her with pure admiration. You have taught the whole galaxy a lesson. Elena's smile faded, replaced by her usual serious expression. She looked back out the window at the infinite stars. Perhaps, she said, but the lesson is not over. The galaxy is full of bullies who only understand force. Today we showed them a new kind of force. They will need time to think about it. And we, she added, turning her gaze back to them, will need to be very smart about what we do next. She gave them another small nod, then turned and walked away, leaving Jean and Sue standing by the window, watching the stars themselves and thinking about the new, uncertain, and incredible future that she had just opened for them. The party in the observation deck went on for a long time, but slowly, people began to leave, their excitement turning into a happy exhaustion. The main lights were dimmed, and the giant view screen was turned off. The room was quiet again, lit only by the soft glow of control panels and the brilliant light of the stars outside the large window. Jean and Sue were among the last to leave. They stood together by the window, looking out at the endless black space dotted with countless suns and worlds. It looked the same as it had that morning, but they knew it was not. Everything had changed. It feels different, doesn't it? Jean said quietly. The stars. Sue nodded. Yes, before they felt far away, like we were just visitors. Now it feels like we belong here, on our own terms. They were silent for a moment, watching a small transport ship drift past like a slow-moving fish in a dark ocean. What she said, Jean began. About what we do next. What do you think she meant? Sue leaned against the cool glass. She meant that winning one fight does not win the war. The Zaire are humiliated. Other species are now wary of us. We are not the harmless new kids anymore. We are the ones who know things that can make others nervous or jealous. So we have to be careful, Jean said. We have to be smart, Sue corrected him. Just like she was. We cannot just build bigger ships and stronger guns now. We have to be better thinkers. Better understanders. A soft chime echoed through the deck. A message appeared on Sue's personal datapad. She picked it up and her eyes widened. "What is it?" Jean asked. "It's an assignment transfer," Sue said, her voice a mix of shock and excitement. "For both of us. We have been reassigned. Effective immediately." "Reassigned? To where? A punishment for something?" "No," Sue said, looking up from the screen, a slow smile spreading across her face. "The opposite. We have been assigned to the new Xenocultural Analysis Unit. It's a special team being formed to study other species to find more red dots. Not just for fighting, for understanding, for diplomacy." Jean read the message over her shoulder. It was true. Their names were there. The orders were signed by Ambassador Lee himself. A note at the bottom added, "Recommended for their sharp perception and understanding of the new paradigm. E. Petrova. She recommended us?" Jean whispered, his heart swelling with pride. "She saw us watching," Sue said. "She knew we understood." Their future, which had once seemed like a simple path of routine jobs on a space station, had suddenly cracked open into something vast and important. They were not just observers anymore. They were to become part of the new human strategy. Meanwhile, in a brightly lit medical bay on the Zaire battleship, Kaler was finally able to move his fingers. The feeling was returning to his limbs in painful, prickling waves. The medics had told him the paralysis was temporary, that there would be no permanent damage. But they could not fix the damage to his spirit. That he lay on the medical bed, staring at the cold, metal ceiling. He replayed the moment in his mind over and over. The calm step, the swift, precise hand, the tiny, insignificant touch. Then, the terrifying void where his power had been. He, the champion who had never taken a step back, had been stopped by a woman who did not even raise her voice. She had not defeated his body. She had defeated everything he believed in. His strength was a joke. His power was meaningless. She had used his own body against him like a tool, turning it off with a touch. A deep shame burned in his chest, hotter than any anger he had ever felt on the human sector of the station. The celebrations had ended. In a quiet office, Ambassador Lee sat with Elena Petrova. A cup of tea sat untouched on the table between them. "Your work here is done, Doctor," Ambassador Lee said. "You can return to Europa whenever you wish. You will have any funding you need for your research, of course." Elena nodded. "Thank you, Ambassador. But my research will now have a new direction." "Oh, the Zarian occipital nexus was one vulnerability," she explained. "But every species has one. A biological, psychological, or cultural pressure point. My new project will be to catalog them. Not as weapons, but as keys. Keys to understanding. Keys to peace." Ambassador Lee smiled. It was a real, tired, hopeful smile. "A library of keys. I can think of no better project for humanity." The first human ships to land on new worlds had carried flags and guns. The next ones, Elena knew, would carry datapads and open hands. But now, everyone would know that within those datapads was a deep and powerful understanding. It was a deterrent more powerful than any threat. The next day, Jean and Sue reported to their new department. The office was new, filled with the hum of advanced computers and the quiet chatter of smart, focused people. On the wall was a simple framed picture. It was not a famous painting or a photo of a general. It was a biological diagram of the Zarian occipital nexus. It was a reminder of their purpose. Not to conquer, but to know. Out in the galaxy, the story was already becoming a legend. It was told on freighters and in spaceports, in alien cafes and on human colonies. The story of the day the human champion was not a soldier, but a scientist. The day the predator was defeated not by a greater predator, but by a single perfect idea. Humanity had entered the galactic stage with a roar of engines and a flash of lasers. But today, they had earned their place with a whisper of knowledge. And the universe was finally listening.